Welcome to the Tick Tock Podcast. The clock is always ticking, so let's synchronize our watches and dive in. I'm your host, Callie Brigham, and I'm here to help you make time for what matters. Well, hi, friends. Welcome to another episode. And this one is going to go down in history as one of the all-time favorites. I know that when you have kids, you're not supposed to have a favorite. When you have podcasts, you're not supposed to have a favorite. When you have podcast guests, you're not supposed to have a favorite. But I'm just going to claim it. This is a favorite. When the idea of this podcast started, and I made a list of people that I would want to have a conversation with and to have an interview with, there was one woman that was on the very top. And today's the day. I get to have that conversation with her. She is a consummate hostess. She is a professional musician. She is a philanthropist. She is a woman who cherishes and collects relationships and values them above everything else. She is Leah D. Kahn, aka Grandma, aka Grandma Deedle. Most all of my viewers and listeners have heard of Grandma Deedle, and she's sitting right next to me today. So welcome to the TikTok podcast, Grandma Deedle.
Well, hi, Callie, and hi to all your friends. I'm Grandma Deedle, but my real name is Leah D. When I was about, maybe 8 years old, a friend of ours came over with a violin, and he was going to give a cousin violin lessons, and she didn't like it at all. And I said to my mom, "Oh, could I try that violin?" Well, I became a violinist, but my kid sister called me Dia Lee, and then it was Deedle with the feedle. And the rest of my life, kids, and I'm now almost 100 years old, it's still Deedle. People don't even know I'm Leah Deedle. They have no idea that's my real name.
That's right. Your alias is Deedle. Everyone that I know calls you. You're either Aunt Deedle or Grandma Deedle. They all know your reputation precedes you. And who has that fiddle now? That fiddle? Who plays that?
I'm a very, very lucky grandma. Guess who has my fiddle? And it's Kalia DeBrandon. And I tell you, it makes me feel so good because I loved playing. And I said, Callie, you're the only one really that's taking the violin seriously. And so it was my pleasure to give you the violin, honey.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I eyed that violin for many years. And when it was finally time, I so honored, Grandma. I'm so honored. And every time I play it, every time I pull it out, I think of you. And it makes the most beautiful music. So thank you for that legacy among so many others.
But I love you playing the bluegrass on it. I mean, it isn't
that
all
violin played all kinds of stuff. No. Now, I believe, in my opinion, you should be trained classically. Then you can play anything. Once you know the foundation of that, you can play just about anything. So,
but the nicest thing is that Callie's mother has picked up her cello again.
That's right.
And I said, oh, and her children are playing the piano. And I said, they have a built-in trio.
We can play
honey,
together.
I want you to do it. Yeah.
That's right. And Grandma, so you heard her say that she's almost 100. You are, as of this recording, you're 99. You will be 100 the end of March.
March 28th.
March 28th. So we're going to have lots to celebrate there. But Grandma, you have embraced technology. We FaceTime with you, with the kids.
Right.
We send you videos of when they play, and it just is a great way for us to stay connected no matter where we are.
Well, I'll have to tell everyone, I think the reason that I reached the age of 99, I have a wonderful family. I've got 3 terrific children, and number 1 grandchild is Kalia Brigham. And then I have a couple of more grandsons, and then I have some greats. And I tell you, it's a wonderful family. And this is what keeps me young. Yeah. I think the kids have kept me young.
Well, and we are going to talk about that too, what your secrets are, which I think are not a secret to anyone that knows you. So we'll get to that too. And for those of you listening, you now get some insider knowledge, just like Deedle is not your real name. Callie is not my real name either. It's a nickname for me. And now everyone knows
And what is
my
your
given name. So my real name is Kalaya, and that's a whole nother story for another day. However, part of my name is in homage to you. And my middle name, which is Belle, is in homage to your mother-in-law, my great-grandmother. Huh? So we do love that heritage that we have.
Well, we said to your mother, how did you get that name of Kalaya? And she said, we threw up all the letters and we knew that K was for a Katie and L was for a Leah and this was for somebody else. Yeah. And so we got Kalaya.
So here I am. I do have to tell one funny story. We're all here together in Hollywood Beach, north of Miami. We gather every year since I was probably 5 years old, Grandma. And family from all around the world comes, from Japan, San Francisco, New York City, now Asheville. We all come and we get to spend time with you for a week. And I was telling the story of when I was a little girl, and we don't know, maybe 7 years old or so. I lived in Madison and you were in Indianapolis. And I would be able to fly to come see you and spend a little time with you.
Can you imagine a 5-year-old?
Yeah. I was young, and my parents would put me on the plane, and then you would greet me.
I would pick her up
to get off the plane. So my given name is Kalaya, and when one time in particular, the flight attendants were coming off the plane with me, and they were handing me off to you, and they kept saying Lulu this, Lulu that, and you finally said, "Who are you talking about?" And they said, "Lulu, your granddaughter." So apparently on the plane, I gave them my name and they said, "Oh, that's quite a name. Do you have a nickname?" And I said, "Yes, my nickname is Lulu." And they called me Lulu the whole flight. They called me Lulu to you. And
you better be careful, Lulu, because your friends might be starting to call you.
Oh, Lulu, no. Yeah, Lulu might be my next nickname here too. Well, Grandma, we have so many stories. And I know this podcast is about time, honoring time, making time for what matters, cherishing time, treasuring it. So we will talk about that. But I want everyone to be introduced to the wonderful you, the magnificent you. So will you tell everyone a little bit about you?
A little bit about me. I'm one of 5 children. I'm the middle one. I don't know what a middle one, whether that's good or bad. But nobody bothered with me. The 2 younger ones didn't. The 2 older ones didn't. So I really was able to do everything I wanted. And as I said, I started playing the violin. And it was really, when it was time to decide what I was going to do when going to college, I decided I wanted to be a music major and I wanted to play the violin. And so I was very fortunate. I was able to go to Northwestern, which had a wonderful music school. But I think the reason I chose it was the orchestra leader in my high school spent his summers teaching there. And he was so handsome. And I thought, you know what? Everybody has to be so good looking. I think I'd better go to that university. It wasn't that the music department was so good, but
Grandma, I did not know that story. Listen to you.
Terrible reason.
That's a middle child for you right there.
And I was a music major, of course, at Northwestern. And I did continue, I'll go on a little bit. I did continue playing the violin in chamber music, particularly, which I loved. And I played it for many, many years until I got a rotary cuff that's lousy and it hurts. And my bow arm is really not very good anymore. But going back to my childhood, of course, if you're born before computers and you're born before anything, you did have a radio. And we listened to serials every night at 6 o'clock. We listened to Dick Tracy. And everybody in the house had to be very quiet because it was very important that we listened to Dick Tracy and what was going to happen to tests the next day. So that was our 6 o'clock. But we never had a family dinner until Sundays because my father worked. And my mother with children was a stay-at-home mom. Women didn't work in those days. Do you realize how fortunate you are? You've got the education, you've got the ability and the opportunity. So I really encourage you. I'm proud of you. I think you're all wonderful. So my mother took care of us. And Sunday, though, was the day we would have lunch. And we would sit around our dining room table. And my father would ask, how were we and what were we doing and how were our grades? And this was the time we had to tell our dad what had happened to us the whole week. I can tell you one funny story, though. My sister Carmel, I think, was the smartest one in the family. And my dad said to her one day, he said, Carmel, I'm so disappointed in you. He said, last semester, you brought home 5 A's. And this semester, you only brought home 4 A's. She said, but Dad, I'm only taking 4 subjects. So that was our Sunday lunches. We didn't have fences. Dogs could just roam all over. We had neighbors that were very friendly. We would borrow from each other. We all knew each other, and we didn't lock our doors. And I remember that my mother she was a coffee destroyer. She drank coffee all the time. And we had a friend of hers. If she saw the kitchen light on, she knew the back door was open, of course, but my mother was up drinking coffee. And so she would come over 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's a crazy beginning of our lives, but this is what I remember.
But you know what that tells me? That tells me that we call her Grandma Net.
Grandma Net.
Grandma Net modeled for you
absolutely
what it was like to make time for people.
But my mother was also a volunteer. My mother would go to the Red Cross meetings every Saturday evening because they had evening meetings. They didn't have afternoon meetings. Most people were home taking care of children. And she was also very involved in her synagogue. And she was also involved in so many activities. And Admiral King came from my town of Lorain, Ohio, and they were dedicating a bridge. And they wanted a woman to represent them, one woman from the entire city, and they chose my mother. So she was really an example for all of us. And I think it goes in the bloodline or something because my Katie is a volunteer, my granddaughter, and I always call Kelly my number one because she's my first. And Kelly, as you all know, is outstanding. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
So having my mother really as a model, it was natural that after I didn't marry until I was late in life. I was almost 27. And when I was 25, my father said, you're not married yet. You've lived half your life. And I was having such a good time. In those days,
little did he know it was only a quarter of your life so far. Yep.
In those days, we dated. We didn't have a boyfriend and that was the boyfriend. And then we married that boyfriend. We dated every guy in the world. And I said at one time, I think I knew every guy in the state of Ohio.
I remember you told me to kiss everybody. You said, Callie, kiss them all.
No, your father did that.
Oh, no.
Your grandfather
Oh, he said kiss them all? Okay. Yeah, my dad would not have said that, I promise you.
Kiss them all, and then you'll know when the right one is there.
But not Maddie. Maddie's not allowed to kiss them all, is she?
Yet.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, but I will tell you, I don't know whether it's right. Howard, my husband, was a blind date, and he took me out one evening in Indianapolis, Indiana. As I said, I came from Lorain, Ohio, and he asked me out one more time. I was there over Memorial Day weekend because I was teaching music in the Cleveland school system. And I said, he got a little frisky. And I held out my hand and I pointed to my wedding finger.
Yeah.
And I said, not until I'm married. And he said, will you marry me? And I said, yes, because I knew so many young men in my day. And I had been proposed to before, but they weren't the right ones. But I'd gone to school with Howard's sister, who was also a music major and a marvelous pianist.
But you've got to finish the story. So you said yes, but
so yes, but I'm going to Europe for 4 months because after 5 years of teaching, everybody took a sabbatical in those days. So if I was taking a sabbatical, I had to go somewhere special. I had a friend and she said, let's go to Europe. And I said, sure. So we went on a ship called the Liberté, which was an old German ship. This is right after the war, remember. This is in 1950. So there were already 4 years. And so the German ships then became French ships and Italian ships and many other kind of ships. And that's another thing. Going to school during 4 years of war, it was difficult. It was difficult because we had friends who had family. My roommate lost a brother-in-law in the first World War, and the first year of the Second World War. And we knew young people, and they were killed. It was a terrible, terrible time. It wasn't a great war, kids.
No, war is not
And
good no matter what.
Let's
Right?
hope there isn't another one.
That's right.
Okay. Anyhow.
So you're in Europe, but you've got this catch at home waiting for you.
Yeah, he said,
so,
how could you give up such a good
doctor
yet?
So your mom tried to make sure that he was still waiting for you when you got back. What did she do?
She sent pictures of me in a bathing suit. I think Howard was in love with my mother. I'm not sure he was in love with me. But your Grandma Annette was exceptional, honey. Yeah. My mother, too, when she was a little girl, she was born in Europe. She was born in Lithuania. And she was the last of her mother's children to come to the United States. All her siblings were here. And she was with her mother as a little girl, and her mother was fearful of the Cossacks coming by. They would drink on a Saturday night, and they would come into houses and wreck them and rape them and who knows what. And my mother used to say, Mother, can I? My mother, Grandma, would say, no. Mother, I'd like, no. No. And my mother said no to me all the time. And I said to myself, when I have children, I'll never say no if I can say yes. How do you like that one?
I like it.
Is that a beauty?
It's a beauty.
Uh-huh.
So she didn't say, I'll never say no, but she said, I'll never say no.
I'll never say no if I can say yes. I don't remember my mother ever saying no. Mm. She would say it differently, but never the word no. Katie, I don't know, does Katie say no to you?
Not really. I kind of figured out how to get her to say yes. She's a pretty easy one. It was my dad that I had to. Yeah. No, she was the easy one. I could get away with it with her. She said yes a lot.
Because Katie knows the story.
She knows the story.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful story. And one of the things that I talk to a lot with our listeners is when you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. Or when you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else. Maybe that's better. So maybe you're saying, no, you can't do this right now, but it's a yes because we're going to be able to do something better later.
You always have a different way of putting it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to use the word no.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So you married this handsome doctor.
I married the handsome doctor, and I married him. I came home from Europe in January, the end of January. I was married on March the 7th. I'm not sure I even knew him, except I'd gone to school with his sister. I knew his mother. So I knew the family. It wasn't as if I didn't know them. And I was married on March 7th and had beautiful plans. I was wearing a champagne wedding dress instead of white because I had ideas of my own. And I didn't feel good. My cousin gave a beautiful party for us the night of the wedding rehearsal, and I didn't feel good. And this was in Cleveland, about 28 miles west of where I was born. And my mother said, well, Ellie, honey, keep Deedle overnight because she's not feeling good. And this way we'll come in the morning and she's married in the afternoon and it'll be fine. Well, that night I got very sick. And the morning of my marriage, I ended up in the hospital having an emergency appendectomy. So everybody sat at this beautiful table and they ate their dinner with the chair down. The bride wasn't there. The bride was in the hospital. And the hospital had a little, I don't know what the problem was, but they'd had a reputation, something had happened, and it wasn't very good. And so the hospital said, could we take pictures or could we tell them about the wedding here in the hospital? And I didn't say anything. I guess Howard did, or my mother said if it would help the hospital, which is an outstanding hospital in Cleveland, Mount Sinai. And they said in the paper, the bride wore white nylon pajamas with blue piping.
And
they had pictures, and it made pictures all over the United States of America. I don't have wedding pictures, but I have pictures from almost every one of the states.
Every newspaper in the United States.
Every newspaper. everywhere, and people would send me all these clippings, and somebody composed a song for me.
Oh, I didn't know
He said,
that.
"Oh, I have that." He
Okay.
said, "I have no idea who you are." He said, "But I hope you have a happy marriage." And he wrote this music.
And you had a very, very, very happy marriage.
And I had a wonderful marriage. Howard never said no.
He never said no either. Didn't he say that who made the decisions in the family?
They must have been joint.
Joint. Okay.
Howard and I never had a fight.
Never?
And he would say the same thing.
Yeah.
We could just agree on something. Politically, he was one party, I was another party, and then he joined my party, which was fine. so we never had any arguments.
Oh, that's how that works.
Yeah.
So, and he had a very busy practice as an OBGYN.
Yeah, he was very.
You started to have children, and of course, were responsible for your children. But I know that.
But
that
when I came to
Indianapolis, to do other things, yeah.
There was a woman who was very outstanding in our community. In fact, she started the Indianapolis Symphony. She was very recognized as one of the top women, like my mother, in the community. Everybody knew her. Her name was Sarah Goodman. And she took me under her wing. And she was very active with the symphony. So one of the first organizations that I joined was the junior group of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. And so then I became a president of this and a president of that. And Sarah said, well, now she said, there are other organizations that you should be involved in. And I said, well, I'll choose what I want to do. And so she had started Brandeis Women. They had no women's group for the university. And she said, I'm not going to say anything. I said, no, I'd love to be on the Brandeis board for Indianapolis. So it was the Brandeis board. There was the National Conference of Christians and Jews, and they asked me to be the representative from the Jewish community. So I sat on that board, and I knew the top people in the Catholic organization and all the Protestants and Baptists and blacks and whites and orange and purple, whatever. And so that was I loved that. I loved that board. And I put on what we call raising children of goodwill, which meant that in schools, every child was important. And regardless of who they were, where they came from, what they looked like, they were all the same. And so we had the teachers come. We had a session. We had 3 or 4 sessions on how to relate to the children in the school class. I loved that project. And
so how did you find time for all of this as you're supporting your husband, who, as an OBGYN, especially back then, on call at any moment would have to leave and deliver babies, right?
But I had, when Katie was little, we had some help, not full-time help. But Katie was a wonderful child. And so being the first child, her father came home every day when he could for lunch. And he would bathe her and he would feed her and he would love her. And you'd think no one ever had a child before.
And he's an OBGYN.
And he's OBGYN.
Yeah. And Katie is my mom.
Well over 5,000, I don't know how many children in his lifetime.
And Katie is my mom, for those of you that are new to our family.
Mm-hmm.
So that was to me, Grandma, it sounds like you made sure your priorities took precedence. Even if that meant having help or saying yes to some things, no to other things. Would that be right?
Yeah. But the first, I think Jancy and Katie are 16 months apart. When we had Jan, we were fortunately able to have help. And then I really could get involved in the things I've been talking about. And so I was thinking, I sat on so many boards in my community. I really did. I was going to say, I love young audiences. Do you know that one?
No.
Young audience would find outstanding musicians, and then we would raise funds for them to send them to either music camps or whatever it might be. We also had what we call the Aspen Music Festival, which is in Aspen, Colorado. And we started a program, and I happened to be one of the originators. And we would bring in outstanding musicians from Indiana University, and they would give a concert, and we would raise money, and we would be able to send one orchestra member to Aspen for the summer. I mean, so it was music, it was education, it was, I don't know. I just didn't, I loved being involved in my community. And we were all volunteers because in those days we couldn't have a job. Nobody wanted women.
You know, I think about what you've chosen to do with your time, even when I know it wasn't convenient with little children and all the things that are a natural part of that stage of life. You chose, Grandma, to invest your time in things that matter, in things that made a difference in other people's lives that you could see then, and maybe you won't ever see the full effect of it. But that's how you chose to
But
spend your time.
Callie, look at all the other women that I was involved with. And most of us, or many of us, that had the opportunity for an education. And those who weren't able to go to a university or to a college, they were just as smart as we were. It didn't make any difference. But we felt the same way about so many things. But I remember taking Ray, who was the youngest in the family, and I didn't have any help. I would take him to a meeting. I put a blanket on the floor and put him on the floor. And that's what we did. But it was fun.
And now your children and your grandchildren are doing the same thing.
They're all involved and enjoying it. And their families are enjoying it.
That's right.
And I think my great-grandchildren will grow up and be the same way.
For sure.
I'm very fortunate. I'm also fortunate that I can still think sometimes. I was telling Callie, Katie, her mother, gave me a book that her Aunt Kathy had given her, and it was called The Book of Charlie. And Charlie lived till he was 109 years old. He'd gone to Northwestern, where I had gone to medical school. The days before penicillin, the days before just about anything you can think of, he had a medical bag. He said the patient either lived or died. They had no way of really treating them. They didn't know how to treat them. They didn't have the pills. They didn't have the knowledge. But Charlie kept on living, and then he went on, and he did come back. He served in the war, First World War. He came back, and he finished his education, and he then ended up being one of the top orthopedic surgeons at Mayo's and here and the next thing. And the reason they were able to find Charlie, his neighbor across the street, it's a crazy story. He sees this fellow who moved in across the street from him, and he decided he would be neighborly. And he walked over and he said, I'm so-and-so. And he's a fine writer, by the way. And George Will thinks he's great. And his reputation as a writer, not a fiction writer. So he interviewed this guy, and the guy said, I'm 102 years old. He said, and you're washing the car? He said, well, my girlfriend, it's her car, and she's still sleeping, so I decided I would wash the car at 102 years old. Now, this is crazy. This is Charlie. And then when he could no longer play golf, he turned his golf stick over and used it as a cane. But he had his mind. And I thought to myself, how fortunate those of us who still can remember a lot of things. And I can go back to my childhood. I was born in 1924 in Lorain, Ohio, March 28th. June 28th, when I was, I was 3 months old. So it was whatever it was,
Yeah, June? That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
April, May, June.
We had the Lorain tornado. And my sister Carmel, who was 3, said, I remember everything. And she did. She said, the garage from next door flew by the window. My mother's had us all sitting by the window yet, which we shouldn't have been doing. And it was terrible. And my brother used to go to the movie house with a cousin every Saturday. And they would sit in the balcony of the Palace Theater. And the Saturday before the tornado, he and his cousin, and my older cousin was the one who took them, would spit over the railing on the kids below. And Esther said, I'm not going to take you to the movies anymore. And Esther lived to 103 with all her faculties. And anyhow, it was the day that the tornado hit, and that particular area of the Palace Theater was destroyed, and the little girl who always sat next to them was killed.
Oh my.
I mean, it's a terrible story.
But the things that you remember.
These are the stories that Carmel told me. I wasn't there.
But you still remember the stories, and you're
Of
sharing them
course.
on, and you will call me. We talk frequently, and you'll call me and say, "Do you remember this?" I'm like, "Grandma, I don't even remember that." So you have a gift.
Well,
You have a
Carmel
gift.
could remember everything. Carmel died at 97. My mother died at 101. And Grandma Nett, honey, remembered everything.
That's right.
She was, the little body gave away.
Yeah.
And I'm sure mine is giving away
I
too.
think you look pretty good.
Okay. Yeah.
And by pretty good, amazing. So, Grandma, a couple last questions for you. I know that we don't live with regret. That's not a healthy way to live. But I do know that my grandfather, your husband, said he did have one regret when it came to what he expected from you. And that if he had to change one thing, he would have changed one thing.
Yeah. How Wednesday afternoon was doctor's afternoon off. If they weren't busy delivering a baby or something like that in Howard's case. And I loved the chamber music. And there was a doctor's chamber music group, and they played Wednesday afternoon. And they'd call me up and say, "Are you free to play the viola?" And I'd say, "Yes." And Howard would be a little bit disappointed. And then there was an evening group that played, and I loved that evening group of chamber music. It was string quartets. And I made always, yes, I would love to go. And I figured if I had help, it was fine. Somebody could take care of the children. And Howard resented it. He said, "I might be home those evenings, and I'm not home very much." And in those days, he didn't have a partner. Nobody had partners. They were on call 24 hours a day. It was different. If the patient could pay, the patient paid. If the patient couldn't pay, the patient didn't pay. And he said the thing that he really was sorry about was that he resented my going out and playing chamber music if he might be home. And, and I guess I never really thought about it being that way. I was just so happy to be playing.
Right. I just think that's beautiful. That's what love is. That's what love is, that says, I wish if I had to do it over again, that I would have given someone the freedom to do something that they loved too. But I know that you had such a beautiful relationship that it wasn't anything that stood in the way of that. But I think it was very considerate and kind of him.
But I'll tell you something, Kelly. I see that same relationship with your mother and your father, with you and Josh.
You're right.
With Janice and my daughter Janice and Jeff, and my son Ray and Matoko.
I agree. All right, Grandma. So what advice, as you come up on your 100th year, what advice or encouragement would you have for the young women that are listening? You've been there. You know what it's like to have so much going on and to feel like you've got to wear so many hats. You have perspective. You can look back and say, this is really what matters. What would you say speaking to them?
I think the important thing is to be able to talk to each other and to feel free to talk to each other and to smile and to laugh. There's so many happy times. Look at all the happy times instead of the other times. I mean, life brings us sorrows as well as happiness, but I think it brings us more happiness, Kelly. I really do, honey. And I think that if you look at life and say, I chose this for my career, or I chose this for the lifestyle that I want, I'm happy with it. But if I'm not happy with it, I'm going to change. I'm not married to whatever I'm doing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I would say, not just in addition to that, but the heart of what I've seen from you is that you value other people and relationships above anything else, above your own preference. I see you always on the phone. You're checking in with everyone. You want to know how they are. You're going to lunch. You're going to dinner. You're involved. And I admire that about you.
But I think it's you, all of my family, that have kept me alive. Seriously. Because, but now I find your mother calling me every day, and I'm thinking, is she calling me because she wants to know if I'm still here? And then I get a call from Janet, but Ray only calls once a week.
I saw a funny meme that said something about as we're best friends when we grow up and we grow older, we send each other a smiley face text every morning, but it's mostly just to make sure we're both alive.
I love
That's
it.
right.
I love it.
Well, Grandma, I ask this question to all of my guests. If I gave you 1 extra hour, you can do whatever you want to with that hour. It's unaccounted for. You can decide anything in the world. What would you do with an extra hour?
I would gather all my children, all my grandchildren, all my great-grandchildren, and hug them and love them and say how fortunate I am. That's what I would do. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that I get to be here with you. This is like an extra hour for me. This is a bonus hour because when our family is together, we rarely get alone time. And I've got to sit here with you.
We have such fun.
We do. And have this conversation.
But
and the
Kelly,
wisdom.
all the cousins know each other. This is another thing. And they like each other.
We love each other.
And to me, the family, honey, is one of the most important things. And a brother, I don't care what it is, or a sister, they can have arguments, but never to the point where you don't talk to each other. Never, never, never. Okay.
So we cherish that. I've cherished this bonus time
with
you, Grandma.
Thank you.
I love you. Thank you for sharing your stories. I know you have so many more, so we'll just have to have you back after your 100th birthday.
That'll be fine. I look forward to it.
Okay.
And when I'm 109, we'll talk some more. Just like Charles.
You'll be my best repeat guest. Your grandma is at 102 and 105. And
why not?
There we go. Well, thank you for this gift, Grandma. You are a treasure.
And good luck to all of you who are listening. I wish you everything well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you, Grandma. God bless you all. Thank you for joining me on the TikTok podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a 5-star review. Your feedback fuels our mission to help you master your time. Set your alarm for our next episode, and until then, make every moment count.